If you've done any sort of cold outreach, chances are you've probably heard of a few of these tools before. Think of Instantly, SalesLoft, Imply.io, Smart Lead. All of these are great for doing email cold outreach. But what about HubSpot Sequences? Now, HubSpot Sequences may not outshine every one of these tools in every aspect, but it's a great choice for anyone who has Sales Hub Pro and a couple of SDRs laying around that's looking to do some prospecting. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to set up HubSpot Sequences and essentially start your own campaign with a small twist. And this twist is going to be your email infrastructure. We'll also go into how to make sure that you have a proper email infrastructure so when you're going at scale and you're prospecting, it doesn't hurt your email's domain reputation. Let's get into it. Typically, I would start with the sequence section of HubSpot. But as I mentioned, there is a twist. One of the big things to note when working with HubSpot Sequences is having a proper email infrastructure. So what do I mean? If you're a sales team or you have a bunch of sales reps who will use your main company email address for outreach, you're pretty much putting yourself at risk for damaging your company's primary domain reputation, getting blacklisted by major email providers. So what's the solution? The solution is having multiple inboxes with proper infrastructure. This is very good because HubSpot gives you the ability to have multiple email accounts, and this opens up the door for a more sophisticated approach for email management and outreach. So that way, when you're actually reaching out to prospects, you're not putting your primary domain at risk, especially if you guys are sending a bunch of emails at scale or in volume. Instead of starting at sequences, I'm going to a different section of HubSpot. If I go over here to settings, general, and then I go into emails, you'll see that you can connect a personal email, in this case, multiple emails, to make this a lot more sophisticated way of reaching out to prospects. Let me see if I can connect like a personal email and walk through the whole phase here. So connect personal email, connect your inbox, and I'll just fill out fake email and click next. And so you can identify email provider. This is by design. Typically, if you did have an email provider already that's associated to this inbox, you would get like a pop-up saying we found Google or Outlook, but in this case, this email isn't real. So I could choose an email provider. Now, this is pretty important. You notice there's a few email providers here. There's Google, Gmail, Microsoft, Outlook, Exchange, and there's other email provider. Now, let's come into detail a bit more about these. So as I mentioned before, if your team is going to be sending a high volume of emails to prospects, and you want to protect your primary email domain infrastructure, you are going to need to spin up an entirely new domain with fresh mailboxes assigned to it. So let's use this as an example. This is your current primary mailbox. As you can see here, you see Gmail. You can swap it out for Outlook, whatever, but I tend to go with Google just because it's easier to set up. But either way, this would be your primary inbox. So this is your company, say company.com, and these are all the mailboxes assigned to this, in this case, Google's mail server. When you, in this case, Spencer, who's a sales rep, are sending loads of emails to clients and prospects, Google has sophisticated algorithms to basically look at things like your grammar. They may look things at like the sending patterns of who's sending the emails. They look at a bunch of different things to say, is this filtered or flagged as spam? So this is why if you send a bunch of emails over time, it may hurt the general email reputation, because you got to remember you're sharing your email infrastructure with other people on the team. Say, for example, this is the CEO, this is the CFO, and so on. Over time, as your sales team starts to send a bunch of emails, maybe this gets flagged as spam. Maybe this gets flagged as spam. Over time, it starts to weigh on the domain itself. So the whole thing may get blacklisted. What gets filtered for spam changes all the time. Google's always changing it, and no one really knows what causes these things to happen. So the way around it, as I mentioned, is essentially create a separation between your go-to-market for sending out emails versus how you send emails for your clients or how your CEO sends emails so it doesn't hurt everybody else on the team. The best thing to do is create an entirely new email infrastructure. So say, for example, I create something on the side here, I'll move it over here. And now this would be the secondary mailbox infrastructure. So that means creating an entirely new mailbox, a domain. What people typically do is they would go and create a new domain or buy a new domain from a registrar like Pork Bun or Cloudflare. And they make it pretty easy to set up and manage. And then you would essentially point the MX record in one of these registrars to point to Google's email server, set up a G Suite account, which is time consuming because you do have to do some things to ensure that the emails you're sending actually land in the inbox. For example, setting up your DKIM, DMARC, making sure your SPF and custom domain tracking and domain forwarding are set up properly. Because if you don't, these things affect your rates of emails going into the actual inbox. If all of that sounds like a headache, there are services that automate that process for you. There's Inbox Automate, Premium Inbox, just to name a few, that essentially spin up these G Suite inboxes to make it a bit more of an easier process. And maybe situations where you may not want to have Google be the main guy that handles your email server. Some people use other platforms to do that for them. One of the ones I've set up in the past for myself and other clients is Mailreef. Mailreef is an example of a dedicated server. And essentially what it does is they spin up a server specifically for you, and then you can assign mailboxes and stuff of that nature. What's nice about that is your reputation is really dependent on you alone. So when you use Gmail and other email providers, you are in a shared pool where you may not know if your next door neighbor is sending gambling material or something like that. That's why you see the other email provider. I will show how that looks in the process of setting it up as well. I am using Mailreef, which is, like I mentioned, a dedicated way to setting up your own private infrastructure. In this case, with a dedicated server they created, because you don't see any selections for that particular setup, you would go to other mail provider and set it up manually. You go through the process, and HubSpot gives you the ability to map the credentials you need to set up that private mailbox. You're going to need your email address, the password for that mailbox. You're going to need the actual server so that way emails can come in, and you can also do outgoing emails. All this stuff can come from your email provider. In this case, I'll get that information from Mailreef, or if you have somebody else you're using, you'll need that information from them. So now I have two different mailboxes. One that I use for maybe client interface stuff. I don't need to necessarily do anything crazy with it. The other I'll probably be using for cold outreach. Now we have that established. Let's move over to sequence. So now that we went ahead and set up our multiple inboxes, let's go through the process of setting up a sequence. So now if I go over here, sequences, I do have a few already created, but let's create one from scratch, as sequences can be a bit complicated to kind of understand what's going on. It's like a mixture of sequences and task, and that's how everything's kind of working under the hood. If I go to sequence, as you can see here, you can create either a dynamic sequence or you can start one from scratch. Start from scratch is one we're going to be using for this example. And then we have pre-made sequences, which is stuff they already kind of pre-made that you can just use and borrow. So if I start from scratch, you can see that things are split up into steps. Yes, you can add more steps with different tasks. Some tasks can be automated, other things can be manual, and you can also obviously create a call task. So if I go to create a sequence, and you can go ahead and add like a manual email, or you can even add something that's automated. The whole thing is you would go ahead and choose a template. You can create your own template. You can, or one for yourself, or something that's private, or for something that's public. But I have like something here that's very generic and basic. You can kind of see like this contact first name, introduction. You can also create like an A and B test. That's pretty cool. Similar stuff that you would see in platforms like Instantly or SalesLoft. It's a similar sequencing that you can actually do, so you can test out your emails and stuff. So I already have some test sequences that I've created. I have a few people enrolled. But the biggest thing is, how do you go ahead and choose which mailbox that you want to add for like sending an automated email or manual email? Well, the best way to go about doing it, and from my perspective, I tested a couple different ways, but this is one of the few ways that seems to work, is you would have to go ahead and enroll your contacts inside the actual campaign. So say, for example, I have these two people here, Josh Gad and Joe Testing. I select next. And then from there, it gives me the ability to choose where and from those emails would be going to. In this case, I can choose either one of my inboxes. In this case, this is the inbox that I set up with the private infrastructure and all that. And then you can mess around and you can create a task immediately, or you can wait for a specific date. And like I said, all this stuff is task driven. So in this case, this is going to be a manual email task rather than something that's going to be an automated email. So it's going to be a follow-up. So once I create this manual email task, or in this case, I send this email, what follow-up will be something that's automated a day later. So let me show you how that looks like. So now that I've already chosen the inbox from down here, go ahead and enroll the contacts. Once that's been done, I go ahead and go to task. And then now I can see the people that's been enrolled in this particular sequence. And this is going to allow me to do the manual task for today. So every day when you have new enrollments, whether it's automated or you manually add in new enrollments into the sequence, whatever's coming up for that particular day are going to show up in task. And this is how you go about actually working through your cadence, in this case, working through your sequence. So now I go ahead and start those 2 tasks. And then it's going to show me the contact record, all the different information. Here's the email. I can change it. I can write something different. And then from there, I would send and complete task. You can also change the from here as well for the manual emails. Although automated is a little bit different. You have to essentially choose which one is going to be from the jump. So from the beginning. Now, I know I didn't go into loads of detail about HubSpot Sequences, as there are tons of YouTube videos out there that I feel like does a good job in that particular area. But the angle of this video is really to talk about your email infrastructure and why it's so important to essentially have a sophisticated layer that goes with your cold outreach to make sure that you're landing in your clients' or prospects' inbox. Now, the big thing to note is you definitely want to monitor your deliverability over time. Obviously, a lot of the industry seems to be moving away from looking at open rates. So you definitely look at things like your reply rate, both negative and positive. You might want to look at other metrics like your meeting to booking rates. Things of that nature kind of gives you an idea of how your inboxes are performing. And if, in this case, if they've been blacklisted or not. And one good way to do that is over time, as you continue to use your secondary inbox for cold outreach, you can start to do inbox placement tests to see if your emails are having a high probability of landing in the spam folder rather than the actual inboxes of the prospects you're reaching out to. You can use something like MailGenius. They have a good platform for testing that out. But there's many more like it. And there's one last tip that I like to add, and that is warm up emails. A lot of people have debates about, hey, should I warm my emails or should I not? I typically do it. I think it's a good idea in this case, just to make sure that you start developing a reputation for your inboxes that's just been created. There are platforms like Warm Up Inbox, and that's just to name a few that are out there that helps with this process as well. As I mentioned, it is a good idea to periodically do an audit of your sales team inboxes. That way, if you do catch something bad, you can do things like change your domain, rotate your email servers, or even create new inboxes over time to make sure that you're not burning out your old ones. Again, this is and sounds like a bit of overkill when it comes to cold outreach, but the game is changing all the time. And the big thing to note is you want to make sure that if you're sending a high volumes of emails to prospects and you're reaching out all the time, you have a bunch of people on your sales team doing the same, that you have a good process to make sure that their emails are actually going into the inbox. No one wants to send an email to the ether and not know that it's actually being received or not. So with all that being said, I'll catch you on the next one. Hopefully this was helpful. Peace.